You ever feel like you're just watching the same movie over and over again, but it's your own life? You know, the same arguments, the same kind of relationships, the same outcomes? Well, today, we're going to dig into why that happens. We're going to look at the neurological code that makes our behavior so darn predictable, and how understanding that code can finally help us change the script. So, let's just jump right in with the big question. Can our behavior actually predict the future? I'm not talking about some mystical crystal ball kind of thing, but in a logical, observable way. Is the future really just an echo of our unresolved past, playing out again and again? Well, according to neuroscience, the answer is a pretty resounding yes. But look, this isn't about prophecy, it's about programming. It's all about how our brains are fundamentally wired to repeat patterns, for better or for worse, simply because it's the most efficient way to operate. Think about it this way. If someone you know reacts with anger every single time they feel criticized, that's not a coincidence. That is a deeply ingrained neural pathway. Their brain is just running a program it has run countless times before. So yeah, it's predictable because it's been practiced. See, our brain is this incredibly efficient, energy-conserving machine. It loves to reuse familiar circuits just to save power. So what happens is that past traumas, our core wounds, even our sense of who we are, they become a kind of automated survival code. Our behavior becomes a neurological signature, and that signature is surprisingly consistent, especially under pressure. And what's so fascinating is that this very scientific viewpoint, it has this powerful parallel in spiritual wisdom. So let's look at two different lenses, one super analytical, the other more intuitive, that both end up describing the exact same phenomenon of human repetition. It's pretty cool. Okay, so from a psychological perspective, this is called repetition compulsion. It's like someone who grew up with a really critical parent and they keep finding themselves in relationships with critical partners. Their brain is unconsciously trying to fix the original wound by replaying it. Now, from a spiritual view, you might hear this called karmic looping. It's this idea that the universe keeps sending you the same test, just, in different classrooms until you finally learn the lesson and pass. So here's the most important point. Whether you see it as a neural pathway or a soul lesson, the cycle just keeps going until awareness interrupts it. The language is different, but the phenomenon, it's identical. The pattern repeats and repeats right up until the moment you choose to finally see it. All right, so let's look at a really powerful real-world example of these patterns in action. One of the most common and frankly often painful dynamics where we see this play out is between people who have narcissistic traits and those who are highly empathetic. Let's break down the neurology behind this predictable dance. So, on a neurological level, what looks like arrogance from the outside is often covering up some deep-seated fragility. The brain of someone with these traits is basically on high alert for anything that feels like a threat to their ego. And when that threat is perceived, their brain's alarm system just goes off, triggering these predictable defense mechanisms like projection or gaslighting. It's a survival response, not a sign of strength. Then, on the other side of the coin, you have the empath. Neurologically, their mirror neurons are highly engaged, which means they can literally feel what other people are feeling. And without really strong emotional boundaries, they become super susceptible to absorbing the emotional states of everyone around them, especially the chaos of someone who's dysregulated. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. When an empath starts to see the pattern of manipulation, they can evolve. There's this concept called the dark empath, and I know it sounds a little sinister, but in its healthy form, it's actually about empowerment. It's an empath who has learned to use strategic thinking and emotional boundaries to protect themselves. They can still feel everything, but they no longer get lost in the feeling. This transformation really hinges on a crucial choice. Once the pattern is finally understood, the healthy path is to use that awareness to set firm boundaries and just observe situations with a calm detachment. The unhealthy path, though, is when that awareness twists and turns into a tool for vengeance. The goal here is wisdom, not warfare. And this table here, it shows just how predictable these patterns can be. These aren't random behaviors. They are predictable stress responses to very specific emotional triggers. For instance, if someone with these traits feels like they're losing control, the next probable move is love bombing to try and pull you back in. If they feel exposed, a smear campaign is an incredibly common defense. It's a playbook, and once you understand the playbook, the moves become a whole lot less surprising. So, knowing all of this, how do we get out of it? How do we move from being caught in these reactive cycles to finding some genuine freedom? Well, the power isn't in predicting what other people are going to do, it's in mastering our own responses. There are a couple of ways to approach this. The scientific path is kind of like being a detective. You map out your core wounds, you identify your defense mechanisms, and you figure out what triggers you. The spiritual path is more like being a gardener. You work on calming your nervous system, healing those old wounds of abandonment, and learning to stop needing approval from others. Honestly, both paths lead to the exact same place, seeing the pattern for what it is. And this, right here, is the ultimate takeaway. When you consciously choose to stop participating in the pattern, when you refuse to give the expected reaction, you break the cycle. You step right out of that predictable script. You become unpredictable. And in that unpredictability, that is true freedom.
And let's be crystal clear about this. This knowledge is not a tool to control or manipulate other people. Its true purpose is to empower you to break your own cycles, to regulate your own nervous system, and to choose a conscious response instead of just an automatic reaction. Because at the end of the day, words can deceive, but behavior does not lie. Patterns do not lie. And if you really learn to listen, you'll hear it. The future whispers through repetition. And real, lasting hearing, it begins at the exact point where your automatic reaction ends and your conscious choice begins.